All right, today we are cracking open a case file that is truly one for the ages. It's a story from the military's darkest corners, a place where advanced science and, well, the supernatural seem to collide. Let's get into it.
So let's just start with the central question, because it's a wild one. Could a massive steel U.S. Navy destroyer just disappear in a flash of light? It sounds like total science fiction, right? But for decades, the rumors have been swirling that this wasn't just a story. It actually happened. To even start to understand what people think happened, we've got to go back to the beginning, to a top-secret mission with a pretty telling codename, Project Rainbow.
I want you to picture the scene. It's 1943. We are right in the thick of World War II. The race for military tech is at an absolute fever pitch. Any little edge you can get over the enemy could mean winning the whole war. The pressure to invent something game-changing was just immense.
And this was supposed to be that game changer, Project Rainbow. The objective? Well, it was to take a warship, the USS Eldridge, and literally make it invisible to enemy radar, a real-life cloaking device. Now here's what makes this story so compelling, the supposed science behind it. This wasn't just some fantasy. The whole experiment was allegedly based on Albert Einstein's unified field theory. Now, in very simple terms, the theory tries to connect electromagnetism and gravity as like two parts of the same whole. The military's plan to basically hijack that unified field, bend light around the ship, and weaponize the very fabric of reality. And that brings us to the moment of truth, the experiment itself, the day that science supposedly bent reality right until it snapped.
So according to the legend and supposed eyewitnesses, this is how it all went down. First, this really strange, eerie, greenish-blue fog just rolls in and completely envelops the ship. Then, a massive, brilliant flash of light explodes from the hull. And then, poof, the USS Eldridge was just gone. Not just invisible, vanished. But here's where the story goes from weird to completely insane. It supposedly reappeared for a couple of minutes down in Norfolk, Virginia, before teleporting right back to its original spot in the Philly Shipyard.
We're talking about a distance of over 200 miles, covered in an instant. This wasn't about being invisible to radar anymore. If the stories are true, this was actual teleportation. It was an unprecedented and, as we're about to see, a truly catastrophic leap in technology. Because when the Eldridge reappeared for good, the experiment was over. But the horror was just beginning. This wasn't a success story, it was a nightmare.
The crew, they were found in an absolutely horrific state. Sailors were walking around completely dazed, suffering from terrible nausea and agony. Some had been driven completely mad by the experience. And get this, others reportedly just vanished into thin air days later. The human cost was beyond devastating.
But this is probably the single most chilling detail from the entire case file. Men were found physically fused into the metal of the ship itself. Just try to imagine that. Their bodies, their limbs, were embedded in the solid steel of the ship's deck and bulkheads, as if just for a moment, man and machine had horrifically merged into one. Whatever they were trying to do, something had gone terribly, terribly wrong.
And in the aftermath of a disaster like that, the story, of course, goes underground. It becomes all about whispers of a massive cover-up, one that allegedly involved some of the greatest scientists who ever lived.
So the legend claims that Albert Einstein was the one who provided the theoretical roadmap for the whole thing. But Nikola Tesla, another absolute genius of the time, was supposedly involved too. The story goes that Tesla actually quit the project, warning that it was way too dangerous and that he foresaw the horrible price the crew would end up paying. And here is the absolute core of the conspiracy. On one hand, you've got the legend. The ship teleported on October 28, 1943. On the other hand, you have the official word from the U.S. Navy, which flat out denies it, saying the U.S. Eldridge wasn't even in Philadelphia on that day. These two stories simply cannot both be true.
So after all these decades of rumors and denials, where does that leave us? Well, the whole case really boils down to two very, very different theories.
Okay, so on one side, you've got the mundane explanation, that this whole thing was just a big misunderstanding of a real naval technology called degaussing. It involves wrapping a ship in giant electrical cables to mess with its magnetic signature. It makes it invisible to magnetic minds, not to your eyes.
Then you have the other theory, the extraordinary one, that the Navy, in its desperate search for a superweapon, accidentally tore a hole in space-time itself.
And really, that's the question we're all left with, isn't it? Was the Philadelphia experiment just a wartime rumor that spun out of control, born from a boring old degaussing test, or did a crew of American sailors pay the ultimate price for an experiment that pushed way too far, way too fast? The file remains open.